Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. To see you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. Pour out your power and love as we sing, holy, holy, holy. High and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory. Pour out your power and love as we sing, holy, holy, holy. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord.
We are going to begin a brand new series this morning on the book of Revelation. I'm kind of excited about it. I hope that you'll be excited about it. I know the world out there is. So what I would like for you to do is get your Bibles out and turn over to Revelation, the first chapter, Revelation 1, and we're going to look at verse 1 through 3. Revelation, the first chapter, verse 1 through 3. Okay? And stay with me, all right, because we're going to go all kinds of different directions probably. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants what must soon take place. He made it known by sending it to his servant John, who testified to everything that he saw, that is the Word of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ. Blessed is the one who reads the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear it, and take it to heart what is written in it, because the time is near. Wow. The book of Revelation. You know, a lot of folks have read the book, or they've tried to read the book, or at least they've heard about the book. But when they get into the imagery of a dragon and, 10-headed monsters rising from the sea, or demon locusts, or, a third of the earth being destroyed, it kind of gets confusing for them. And then when you hear all this stuff coupled with the mass media blitz that we have going on this day and age, you've got the TV prophets, you've got the end times, the rapture, Armageddon. It's no wonder people get scared, right? As a matter of fact, when you get into your television sets, you see the History Channel has their 2012 Doomsday Blitz about the mega earthquakes destroying the West Coast. You have Krakatoa that's going to erupt and cause this giant tsunami. You have all these asteroids that are going to, from space that's going to hit the Earth and wipe out human life. Then what is it? The Mayan calendar, December 21st. Then you have the Hopi Blue Star predictions. And of course, we can't leave out Nostradamus, right? Or what about the old-timers like Hal Lindsey, Late Great Planet Earth, or John Hagee from Daniel to Doomsday? All this stuff is there. People are running around today in fear of World War III. Either that, or they're ridiculing the Bible as being something, some sort of fantasy religion. A lot of books are out. C.R. Chapman, in his book Apocalyptic Tremor, wrote that the earth shakes and the seas roar and the tremors of our age cannot be ignored. Has the end-time tribulations made her entrance upon the stage of our world? He says so. Dr. Donald Bell, I believe his name is, Knighthood of Christian Warriors. What he has said, that we are right on the verge of devastating events that will create great fear and chaos throughout the world, especially in our comfort-seeking nation. He says the end-time events are quite mystifying and extremely critical for those of us living today to understand. Then you have another fellow by the name of J.K. Kelly, who writes Revelation 2.0, and he has the title of it subtitled, A New Approach to the Coming Tribulation. And what he is saying is that New York City is Mystery Babylon that you read about, and that it's the capital of the economic capital of the United States, and it's long overdue for God's judgment. As a matter of fact, he talks about the Antichrist, and he says the Antichrist is a wicked being that breaks the spiritual biological barrier as a result of genetic experimentation. And he's going to lead the world by rising to power from 3 Middle Eastern countries and promise an era of peace, but his rule is going to be marked by persecution of the saints when he establishes Islam as the world's only religion. Wow. All that stuff is being thrown at people. Now, if you're really confused, you can do what I did. You can go to Barnes & Noble and you can buy this book. It's called The Book of Revelation for Dummies. Okay? I bought it, took it home, I read it, took it back to him, says, I guess I'm not a dummy because I can't understand what this guy's writing about. Says, hey, not to worry, we've got another book for you. So he gave me this one. It's called The Complete Idiot's Guide to the Book of Revelation. And that's great, right? I'm either a dummy or an idiot. Is that how you feel? When you get to the book of Revelation and you pick it up and you start reading, do you think to yourself, I must be either dumb or an idiot because I can't really understand all this stuff in here that everybody's throwing at me all the time? And they're changing it every time I turn around. Sometimes I think I got it, and sometimes I get so confused. I mean, after all, are those demon locusts in chapter 9 really Apache helicopters like one writer says? And is that stinger in their tail scorpion missiles like another writer claims? And what about old 666? You know, we all read about him. Is it really the Emperor Nero or is it Adolf Hitler? But I also heard in my younger days it was Richard Nixon, Henry Kissinger, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, or Ahmadinejad over in Iran. And what about, you know, every generation identifies 666 as somebody else. What about the Antichrist? You know, I can't even find that in the book of Revelation, but some people equate him with old 666, and some people say he's just somebody else that's going to come later. So here's the real question, folks. Can I really understand Revelation, or do I just forget it that it's in the Bible and go on my merry way? I want you to look at what some folks are saying. Some scholars, categorize the book of Revelation as what's called apocalyptic literature. I'm going to talk more about that in just a minute, but first I want to look at 4 major approaches for interpretation, okay? First one, we call that the preterist approach, or preterism. And the term preterism comes from a Latin word, preter, which means past. And what a preterist does when he goes to the book of Revelation, he believes that the prophecies in Revelation have already been fulfilled and they were all pointing toward the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. They say that most of Revelation before chapter 20 was fulfilled. They hold that the book of Revelation is not about the second coming of Christ, but it's a book about the destruction of Jerusalem and the downfall of Israel and Christ's victory over his enemies. Okay? However, despite that view, some of them still believe that there is going to be a future second coming of Christ. Then you have another group called the historist, or the historic approach. And what the historic approach does, it holds that Revelation is the symbolic presentation of the course of history from the church, or the beginning of the church, all the way through to the end of time. In other words, it's a chronology, chapter 1 to chapter 22. In other words, Revelation is a pre-written account of history from the time of John all the way to the end of the world. The fulfillment is ongoing, and it's been going on for almost 2,000 years. And the book of the historist would see events in the book of Revelation like the rise of Rome, the rise of the Roman Catholic Church, the emergence of Islam, World War II, World War III, all these other things, okay? That's what the historist would see. Then you have another group called the idealist, and the idealists, they're not trying to find the, individual fulfillment in all these prophecies. What they're doing is they're stressing lessons to be learned. And what the idealist is saying is that the one main lesson from the book of Revelation that we need to learn is that good overcomes evil. And all the rest of it is just symbolic language. Then you have the futurist, and they're probably the most prominent group in the world today. And the futurist says that the majority of the prophecies in Revelation have not yet been fulfilled. As a matter of fact, they're going to be fulfilled at some stage in the future. Now, most futurists, what they do is they believe that everything from chapter 4 onward is going to take place in a real short period of time right before the return of Jesus. And that's going to include the rapture, which I'm sure many of you have heard about. That's the taking up of the church. And it's also going to include a 7-day period of tribulation. So with all these views, here's my question for you. What are we to believe? Because new ones are coming out every day. Which approach do we choose? Again, can I really understand the book of Revelation? I just forget it's in the Bible and go on my merry way. I want to go back to Revelation 1. Let's start by looking at it again. Notice what it says. The revelation of Jesus Christ. Stop right there. I want you to look at that word revelation. Go ahead and circle it. It's a Greek word. The word in Greek is apocalypsis. And that word has come to mean many things over the last 2,000 years. As a matter of fact, it's completely different in the minds of a lot of people from the day John wrote it. Some folks, it conjures up the idea of a period of catastrophic upheaval that's going to occur. And people talk about it all day long. People on television do that left and right. You know, the apocalypse is coming. And now Jesus is going to sit on judgment of mankind. To other people, those who are in the know, it's simply a style of writing represented in Jewish and Christian literature. And basically what it does is it's revealing the secrets of the heavenly world by some angelic, mediation. Now, I want you to notice something. The Bible, written by the men who wrote the Bible, also used some of this language. Ezekiel, Isaiah, Daniel, Zechariah, and of course John here in the book of Revelation. By the way, Revelation is often called the apocalypse. But see, the style of writing wasn't limited to this. There are several non-biblical books that are written basically in the same style of the book that we're going to be starting to study today. They're written in a style that is called apocalyptic literature. And there's a collection of books that you probably don't know about called the pseudepigrapha, and that's a $40 word you don't need to remember. But it has a number of early Jewish writings like 1st Enoch or 2nd Baruch or Ezra. And this style of writing covers a considerable period of time. It's best known books of the Jews around 200 years before Christ, and they continue all the way to about AD 100. And the main thing to remember is that they were there to serve a purpose, just like all apocalyptic writing is. Remember, God's people throughout the intertestament period between Malachi and Matthew are struggling. Even in the New Testament, they're struggling. And there are three basic questions that apocalyptic literature attempts to answer. The first question is this: where is God? Where's God? It doesn't make any difference if you were the Jews after the destruction of the temple by Nebuchadnezzar, or you're a Jew under Roman occupation, or you're a Christian being crucified. People were being persecuted and they were hurting. And the main question in apocalyptic literature is, where's God? Isaiah says it plainly over in Isaiah 49:14. The Lord has forsaken me. The Lord's forgotten me. Where are you, Lord? That's one of the questions. The second question that is asked is, Lord, why is all this stuff happening to us? You see, from about 597 BC, with that first deportation from Babylon, throughout the Jewish history, we find the Jewish people suffering under people like Nebuchadnezzar. Then the Seleucid Empire, and then the Intertestament period, and finally Roman domination, all right? Jeremiah said it like this when he asked the question, why are bad things happening? The people asked in Jeremiah's day, have you rejected Judah completely? Do you despise Zion? Why have you afflicted us so that we cannot be healed? We hope for peace, but no good has come, for a time of healing, but there's only terror. That's over Jeremiah 14:19. And so the question is, God, where are you, and why is this stuff happening? Third question in apocalyptic literature is, God, what are you going to do about it? And Isaiah answers it this way. He says, don't be afraid, O worm Jacob, O little Israel. I myself will help you, declares the Lord, your Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. Isaiah 41:14. You see, apocalyptic literature differs in that it answers these three questions with strange, vivid imagery, not with the plain talk like Isaiah and Amos and Jeremiah and the other prophets. The apocalyptic author speaks in picture metaphors. I'm going to talk more about that in a little while. But for now, I just want you to remember these three questions. It answers, God, where are you? Why are things as they are? And God, what are you going to do about it? Now think about that in Christianity. Persecution's coming. Where are you, God? I'm sitting on my throne. Why are things as they are? Let me show you these four horsemen. What are you going to do about it? Blowing my trumpet warnings. Okay? Let's go back to Revelation 1. Look at the word revelation again. The English translation of that word is apocalypsis. And it means this. It means a laying bare, a disclosure of truth. You can find the same imagery in the Septuagint version of 1 Samuel 20, verse 30, where it carries the idea of nakedness. And so the imagery of the Word is a stripping away or stripping naked the realities of life. Now I want you to remember the question, God, where are you? Why is this happening? What are you doing about it? In the very first word in the book of Revelation, God says this, apocalypsis. Here is the answer to your questions. I've given them to Jesus. He's given them to an angel who gave them to John, and John is going to give them to you. God is saying, I'm going to lay everything bare before you. I'm going to strip away all the facade of the unknown. I'm going to reveal everything to you. You will have your answers. Back in verse 1 again. Okay. The revelation of Jesus Christ, God gave Him to show His servants what must soon take place. I'm going to talk about that soon take place next week, but I want you to stop again right here. I want you to notice that this revelation is given to Jesus by God, and there's a purpose in it. And that purpose is this. John must show his servants what must soon take place. That word show. That's from another Greek word, diagnuo. You don't need all these Greek words, but I'm just throwing them out there for you because it's important to know that it means to demonstrate or to show or cause something to be seen. Luke quotes Paul over in the farewell address to the Ephesian elders in Acts the 20th chapter, verse 35. And the Apostle Paul says this, in everything I did, I showed you, diagnuo, by this kind of hard work that we must help the weak. I showed you by what I did. You were able to see that. John is told to show the revelation to his readers. But how? The latter part of that verse is that he made it known by sending his angel to his servant John. Circle that phrase, made it known. The Greek word there is samaneo. And the verb means he made something clear. Boy, that doesn't sound right, does it? Doesn't sound very clear to me. Jesus used the same word in John 12, verse 23. And starting in verse 27, he says, now my heart is troubled. And what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? No, it was for this very hour and very reason that I come to this hour. So Father, glorify your name. And then this voice from heaven comes down. And this voice speaks out. It says, I have glorified it and I will glorify it again. And in verse 29, the crowd was there, heard the voice, and they said, some of it said it was thunder, and others said that an angel had spoken. And Jesus said, this voice was for your benefit, not mine. Now is the time for judgment to come on this world. Now the prince of this world will be cast out. Verse 32, look at what Jesus says. But when I am lifted up from the earth. Now when I say that, what do you think of? When I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw all men to myself. Look at verse 33. Then he said this to show, samaneo, the kind of death he was going to die. When he said, I am going to be lifted up from the earth, he created a word picture in the minds of those people standing there. The imagery everyone could visualize. And he used a common euphemism for crucifixion. And that's what God's doing in the book of Revelation. He's created an imagery in the minds of those who hear. But folks, it's an imagery that they're already familiar with. Verse 34 says that the crowd said, hey, we've heard from the law that the Christ is going to remain forever, so how can you say this Son of Man is going to be lifted up? Who is this Son of Man that you're talking about anyway? Okay? They had heard from God's Word about Jesus. Now John's told to make this revelation clear, to show it to the people. How? By writing all kinds of strange stuff that we can't understand? Come on already. You know, again, look at Revelation in the first chapter, verse 3. Notice what he says. Blessed is the one who reads the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear it and take to heart what is written in it. Stop right there. I want you to notice what John is saying here. There's a blessing for the ones who read the word of this prophecy and for those who hear it and take it to heart. They're going to be blessed as well. That word for blessed, Makarios. A lot of people say, well, blessed just simply means happy. I'm going to tell you another word it means. A lot of preachers will tell you this. It means something else. Over in Luke the 23rd chapter, Jesus is being led to the cross of Calvary, and Simon the Cyrenian is forced to carry his cross. And in verse 27, it says that a large number of people followed him, including some women who were mourning and wailing for him. And Jesus turns to these women and he says, daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, weep for yourselves and for your children. For the time will come when you will say, blessed, Makarios, are better off, are those barren women whose wombs have never borne and breasts that never nursed. They will say to the mountains, fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. Is he saying that Jewish women who never have children are supposed to be happy? No. What he's saying is there is going to come a time when those women who never had children are going to be glad they didn't, because they've never nursed a child, they're not having to drag a child away, they're not having to watch a child be killed or suffer or what have you. And Jesus is quoting Hosea the 10th chapter verse 8 there in verse 30. And what he's doing is alluding to the day of judgment against Jerusalem. It's a day that God come in judgment against the nation of Israel when Assyria came and carried them off. And here Jesus is talking about the destruction of Jerusalem, and what he's saying is in that day, women who never had children are going to be better off than those women who have children and are going to try to take them off. That's the idea of Revelation, blessed, there in verse 3. Those who read the book and those who hear the words are going to be better off than those who don't. Why? It's because God is laying out everything before you. God is stripping away the facade of the unknown. He's revealing answers to everything that you need to know. He's giving you the answers. Well, all right, if he's given me the answers, why are there so many different ways to interpret the book? You've got the preterist, the historical, the futurist, the idealist. And folks, there's thousands of others out there. Which one do we choose? Some people just say, well, I don't think we can understand the book because there's so many choices, so many interpretations. 7 times in the next 2 chapters, Jesus says this: he that hath an ear to hear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. That word hear is akuo, and it means to understand and perceive what is being said. So how can we understand and perceive what John is writing to us? Let me say this. We will never understand the imagery of the book of Revelation if we just speculate about it. If we just come at it from a modern day perspective, what we're going to have to do is go back in time to a dimly lit room and listen to somebody read that book from a 1st century perspective. Let me give you an example. I want to tell you a little story in the language of the apocalypse. Okay? I'm going to be silly for just a minute. He that hath ears to hear, let him hear. Okay? I looked, and behold, I saw a small girl child dressed in scarlet, and she held a basket in her hand. And the child was wandering through a valley between 2 mountains. And there were flowers of all kinds on the sides of the mountains. And then behind me I heard a voice crying out a warning, saying, beware of the forest, for there is danger among the trees. As the child walked through the shadows of the valley, I saw a large creature resembling a mangy dog standing upon a rock. And this large creature spoke to the girl child dressed in scarlet in a voice that was as sweet as a honeycomb, but as deadly as a viper. From whence dost thou come? Where art thou going? Said the creature. And the girl child said, I travel to the home of my mother's mother. And suddenly, just as the gloom of night swallows up the brightness of day, the beast was gone. And as quickly as a hunter would slay a snare, the large beast appeared in the dwelling of an old woman, and he devoured her. And then I looked, and I saw the beast lying in a bed, dressed in a green flannel nightgown and wearing a purple sleeping cap. And the beast had the appearance of an old woman. The female child appeared at the door, and in her hand she held 2 loaves of bread, a block of cheese, and 4 red apples. As the child went through the door, she saw a beast that looked like her mother's mother, but it had large eyes and large ears, like those of a great wolf. She spoke, and the beast sprang from the bed and tried to devour her. Suddenly, a huge man with an axe in his hand appeared, and he slew the great beast, and the girl child was spared. He that hath an ear to hear, let him hear. Enough of this silliness. How many of you understood what the story was about? Okay. Who was the girl child dressed in scarlet? There you go. Who was the great beast with large eyes and large ears? Why did you understand that imagery? Because I never mentioned Little Red Riding Hood. You understood the imagery because you knew the original story. That's the advantage of those in the first century who sat listening to the reading of Revelation. They had a foundation from the imagery. Where did it come from? Did the preachers speculate that the locusts in Revelation were some sort of new weapon devised by Rome? Of course not. Of course not. They had an understanding of Scripture, the Old Testament, which is all they had. And one of the things that probably came to their mind when they got over to Revelation 9 was the imagery of locusts was about the same thing that we find in the prophet Joel or maybe even Amos. It's God's judgment upon Israel. That was the assurance of God bringing judgment upon them, and this is the assurance of God bringing judgment upon the wicked, even as we speak. So are we going to adopt this preterist view or the historical view or the idealist view or the futurist view when we get into Revelation next week? Let me suggest to you none of the above. We're going to do what the first century Christian did. We're going to do what those who never heard of these various views have done. We're going to adopt a biblical approach. Where there's confusion, we're going to stick to what God says and what He's revealed to us. We're out of time. Next week, we're going to get deep into the book. Stay with us. It's going to be interesting because it's important what God's revealed.
There's no God like Jehovah. Behold, He comes, riding on the clouds, shining like the sun, at the trumpet call. So lift your voice. It's the year of Jubilee, and out of Zion's hill salvation comes. So lift your voice. It's the year of Jubilee, and out of Zion's hill salvation